He's Ross Tucker, CBS Sports, Westwood One, NFL, college football analyst, and host of the Ross Tucker Football Podcast. Busy man. He was on the call last night with the Packers and the Eagles, also on the sidelines for the Steelers and the Ravens. And he'll be in the booth with Kevin Harlan for the Texans-Chiefs on Saturday in the divisional playoff. And get ready to hear this voice very often over the weekend, Ross.
Dallas Goedert is a beast. The Philadelphia Eagles cannot be stopped. Look at what he did to Valentine. That's an embarrassment, Ross Tucker.
Hi, Ross.
Hey, Dan, you know what I want? I think you, at some point this week, maybe Friday, you could do a play-by-play, like do a couple plays with Fritzy doing his Kevin Harlan and Paulie doing his terrible impression of me. Oh, I love me. Nice. Or however Paulie does. Like, that would be, I guarantee I will cut the clip. I'll put it on social media. If you guys do a couple play, do a series of Fritzy and Paulie as Kevin Harlan and me. That would be amazing.
All right. Well, Fritzy, why don't you give us a little bit of the Chiefs against the Texans, and then Paulie will jump in and be the analyst on the call.
Patrick Mahomes back to pass. He avoids the rush. He's going down the sideline, and that's another 12 yards for Patrick and another first down for Kansas City.
I love Mahomes. Mahomes can get the ball in the pocket like anybody. And Kansas City, the other thing about Kansas City, sauce on ribs. Look it up, Google it, legit.
There you go, Ross. You asked for it. You got it. All right. Where do you want to start here? You want to start with the Eagles against the Packers, or you want to go back to the Steelers loss?
I actually want to talk about the Steelers. I want to start there because, you know, Dan, I live in central Pennsylvania, right? So where I live now, it's like 50-50 Eagles fan, Steelers. I grew up closer to Philly and grew up as an Eagles fan. I can't remember watching a Pittsburgh Steelers team get beat up physically that badly. You know, everybody focuses, I feel like, on the quarterback situation. And in fairness, they're in a tough spot there. Like, what's your solution or anybody's solution for the Steelers to get a quarterback that can compete with Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes, Joe Burrow? Like, it's hard. They're in a tough spot there. But that's a separate issue. Their defense, Dan, this is the Pittsburgh Steelers. I mean, you have Cam Hayward, TJ Watt, you're paying Patrick Queen, you're paying Minkah Fitzpatrick. They have a lot. Alex Highsmith's getting paid. They have a lot of resources invested in that unit. And for the Ravens to have 250 yards rushing with 6 minutes left in the third quarter, 6 minutes left in the third. And by the way, the Ravens have had one Pro Bowl receiver in franchise history, Zay Flowers. He was out for the game. He was not playing in the game. So they don't have by far their best receiver, and you allow the Ravens to run you over like that. It had to be embarrassing for a Steelers fan to watch it. I thought that was one of the most notable, like if you told me best and worst of the weekend, I would say worst of the weekend was watching the Pittsburgh Steelers get run over, around, and through by Derrick Henry and the Ravens.
Well, let's look at what happens in the offseason with the Steelers. You have Russell Wilson. I don't think Mike Tomlin's going anywhere. So what changes do you see with them?
I agree about Tomlin. He's a good coach. I will say, and we probably talked about this last week, there's a gigantic disconnect between how people feel about him nationally and how the locals feel about him because he hasn't won a playoff game in forever. But I would also submit to you, in how many of those playoff games did he have the better quarterback? How many of those playoff games? The problem is, you know, everybody wants him to get somebody better. How are you going to do that? You know, we have to live in the real world. They're not going to draft somebody. They're not going to draft high enough. So who could the Steelers get that's better? Do they take a swing at Aaron Rodgers? Do they go way out of character and try to pay a lot of money for Sam Darnold? I mean, these other guys, they're just not available. To get a top 10 guy, it just doesn't happen. I actually thought Russell Wilson Jr. III played pretty darn well in the second half of that game. and gave them a chance to win. If I'm the Steelers, maybe I have somebody else compete with him, but he's probably your best option to win a bunch of games next year and have a chance to win a playoff game.
But we make it seem like Mike Tomlin's not involved in decisions to get these quarterbacks. Is it just, hey, the front office takes care of this and we're going to get you a quarterback and you'll just make him better? I imagine he's involved, given his tenure with the Steelers. He's involved in who they're bringing in. So there is culpability throughout, the Steelers, including Mike Tomlin, with that.
No question. He's definitely involved because I know he's a big Russell Wilson fan. I actually thought bringing in both Justin Fields and Russell Wilson this offseason was really smart to kind of give you two bites at the apple. They exceeded expectations. I think their season win total was 8.5. So they exceeded expectations. Obviously, they faltered down the stretch. There's no question, Dan, that he's part of picking the quarterback. No doubt about it. But everybody that complained about the Steelers quarterback situation doesn't have a solution. So you want them to try to lose every game for next year and then have the number one pick and take the quarterback next year? Like, they can't trade for somebody that's better than what they have. Those guys aren't getting traded. I don't know. Maybe it'll be Derek Carr. Maybe it's Aaron Rodgers. I don't know what. They're not going to get a top 10 guy. They're going to have to do whatever they can to get the best guy available.
You've got the addition of Derrick Henry with Lamar Jackson. And I always felt like it seemed like the Ravens got one-dimensional in the playoffs. Maybe you start to panic a little bit. They don't have to be one-dimensional. They can be two-dimensional running and then add another dimension with the passing of Lamar Jackson. And hopefully you get Zay Flowers back. But what makes this Raven team different?
I love that point, Dan. Love that point. Because it's funny, I did the Ravens-Browns game earlier in the year, and we were talking with John Harbaugh, about Derrick Henry. And he has a nice way of just kind of telling you like it is. He said, you know what? We were talking about it, and I said, we're a running team. What it would be like if we had a really good runner? Because the Ravens have been a running team with Lamar Jackson, but they've never really had like a really good running back. J.K. Dobbins is pretty good, but he kept getting hurt, and they've had like Gus Edwards. They've had guys, and they've had a lot of success running it because of the scheme and because of Lamar. But this is like the grand experiment that's working fabulously, is to actually have a really, really good running back like Derrick Henry, which makes them so difficult to defend. And by the way, I don't think it's a great matchup for the Bills. I mean, I love the Bills. That was my favorite team I played for out of the 5, and it's good that they have a home game, but that is going to be tough because as much as you want to stop the run, there's a lot of times because of Lamar that you don't really have a very good solution. And your solution to put everybody in there, well, then you're manning up the tight ends and they run play action pass, and both Likely and Mark Andrews, you're putting your linebackers or safeties in a tough spot. I mean, there's a reason why Lamar had the ridiculous stats he had, is because there really aren't that many good answers for a defense with having Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry in the same backfield.
And the Ravens are favored by 1.5 against the Bills. We're talking Ross Tucker, CBS Sports Westwood One, and host of the Ross Tucker Football Podcast. How should we look at Justin Herbert?
I think the same way we always have. I think he's a very good quarterback. And I said this, I did that Patriots-Chargers game for NFL Network. He's a very good quarterback. A lot of teams would love to have him, but we're not going to consider him an elite quarterback until we feel like he elevates the guys around him to the point where he's winning some playoff games. I mean, and that's just the reality of the situation. Look, a lot of people aren't going to put Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson in certain categories until they get to a Super Bowl and win it. We're not going to put Herbert even in their category until he finds a way to be able to take this team to the next level. In fairness to him, their O-line got wrecked, and they have a bottom 5 receiving core in the NFL. So they exceeded expectations. They did not have the same personnel as the Texans or even most of these teams in the playoffs. They knew it, talking with the Chargers coaches, I think they kind of knew it, that they were a year away from being a legitimate contender. They're going to get better on the interior O-line. They're going to get better at receiver, and Herbert's going to have a much better opportunity to actually win a couple playoff games next year and try to get. He's like in the friend zone. He's in the good quarterback zone right now. He needs to win some playoff games to get into that next category.
Did the Eagles look good or great?
Good. Yeah, they did not look great because they did not look very good on offense. Their defense was awesome. To force 4 turnovers. They've had the best defense in the NFL since the bye week. They were fantastic for the most part in that game. But offensively, that was rough. I mean, that Jalen Hurts clearly was rusty, did not play well. I thought the Packers, that D coordinator, Jeff Hafley, had a good plan between, forcing Hurts to stay in the pocket and make throws from the pocket, but then also bringing blitzes at times. I mean, the reality is for the Eagles to go to the Super Bowl, Hurts going to have to play better than that. I mean, if he played like that in Detroit, they wouldn't win. I don't even know if they would win next week against the Rams or the Vikings if he plays like that. He's going to have to play better than he did. I think he will. I mean, he had missed almost 3 full games. That was kind of his first game back. I would expect him to have a much better performance next week against the winner of tonight's game.
Yeah, I just look at Jalen Hurts, and I'm probably in the minority. I think he's just a good quarterback on a really good team. And look, he had an unbelievable Super Bowl. Could have been the MVP even in a losing effort there. But I'm waiting to see more from him. And maybe that's not fair. That's maybe who he is for that team. But that's just the indication I always get with him.
Well, and Dan, there's no question. I mean, he has not been a top 10 quarterback in the NFL this year. He's got the best situation a quarterback maybe has ever had. I mean, they have the best offensive line in the league, okay? He has the best running back in the league. The tight end, Dallas Goedert, is a beast. He's a top 5 tight end. The receiver duo is at least a top 5 duo. I mean, we're talking about like Troy Aikman with the Cowboys. I'm like, how often are you in a situation where every guy around you is top 5 in their spot? They should be able to put up a bunch of points. He should be able to play better than he did yesterday, and they're going to need him to for sure.
Let's look at the losing teams. We talked about the Steelers. Let's look ahead to who you like better with the Broncos, Packers, and Buccaneers. Who's set up for success better?
I think it's the Packers. Yeah, I think it's the Packers. I mean, they had this year the second youngest team ever in the playoffs. The youngest team ever in the playoffs was the Packers last year. I mean, they're all homegrown. They got really beat up in that game. To have no Christian Watson, then you lose both Dobbs and Reed during the game. They lose their best offensive lineman, Elton Jenkins. They lose the turnover battle 4-0, and they still were right there. I mean, if the turnover battle's 3-1, do the Packers win the game? If they only lose 1 receiver and not 3 receivers, do they win the game? I think the Packers are positioned to have success next year. They kind of took a step back here at the end of the season. They got to figure out why that was the case these last 3 games, and being banged up is part of it. But I would still be buying stock in the Green Bay Packers. And I didn't think Jordan Love's performance was anywhere near what Herbert's was. I thought Jordan Love played pretty well. I mean, the one interception to Bond was bad, but the first one was a great play by Slay. The last one, he just had to try to make a play, and they probably should have called interference on Bond. I really thought Jordan Love only had 1 bad interception. He had some nice throws. Maybe could have made those other touchdown throws down near the goal line in the third quarter when they were still right in it. But I would be bullish on Jordan Love and the Packers moving forward.
I have an assignment for you. in this game coming up. You have the Texans
Okay.
and the Chiefs. If this happens, a receiver caused interception. So let's say it goes off the hands like it did the tight end with the Chargers. It's a receiver caused interception, an RCI. And then you could throw that in, and Kevin Harlan would probably then acknowledge that. How would Kevin Harlan acknowledge that?
You've got to be kidding me. That is not acceptable.
That was pretty short, Fritzy.
Yeah,
I was
know.
expecting more of that. So here's the deal. Now everybody has to listen to my broadcast on Saturday. If that happens, I'm getting RCI in the broadcast. I am getting RCI in the broadcast. Here's the question. Do I have to credit you, Dan, personally?
No.
Do I have to credit the Dan Patrick Show, or do I just have to get RCI in the game?
No. Don't need to credit me at all. I want this to be about you. I want you to hopefully get credit for it where somebody goes, yeah, he went to Princeton. Yeah, that's why he came up with RCI.
Yeah, hey, you know what's funny about that, Dan? You're going to love this. Saturday night during the game, I'm on the sideline, and I called George Pickens mercurial because George Pickens is mercurial, and you can't say pain in the whatever on the radio, right? So he's mercurial, and the play-by-play guy, Ryan Radke, and Mike Golick, the color analyst, they're making fun of me, and they're saying I'm using big words, and they're saying I Princeton guy or whatever, which I didn't really look at mercurial as being like a fancy word. Sunday morning, so I drive back from Baltimore here to Pennsylvania, and I talked to my daughters. I asked them first if they've ever heard of mercurial. They have no idea what I'm talking about. Then I asked my wife, and she didn't know. So that's a fail. That's a fail as a radio guy. If you use a word, my wife's very smart. She went to Bucknell. She got her MBA from Kellogg. If she doesn't know what mercurial means, I should not be saying that on the radio. That's a bad job by me.
I think you just called your family dumb, is what you did.
Well, in fairness, my daughters are 11 and 12, and hopefully I'm now praying my wife does not see this clip. It's a good thing there aren't 500 stations around the country listening right now.
And, of course, everybody knows Mercurial Morris, who ran for the Miami Dolphins. That was his real name, Mercurial. What, Todd?
The definition is of or having to do with mercury.
No, it's not.
I'm joking.
I don't.
That's what a lot of dictionaries will take the word and use that as the explanation of the meaning. Of or having to do with mercury.
Thank you, Todd. Ross, great to talk to you. Safe travels. Remember, RCI.
RCI, I'm ready for it. Hopefully it happens.
All right. Ross Tucker, CBS Sports Westwood One, and the Ross Tucker Football Podcast. He'll be on the call with Kevin Harlan, Texans Chiefs. That'll be Saturday, 4:30 Eastern. We'll come back. We got our play of the day. We'll work in some phone calls as we always do every Monday. Best and worst of the weekend after this.